Skill-based matchmaking is a phrase that sends shivers down every hardcore gamer's spines. We hate skill-based matchmaking. We don't like it. It is the final boss of fun in all of the games that we've come to enjoy over the years. But what is it? Where did it come from? Why are all these companies implementing it into their multiplayer games? And more importantly, why is it ruining all of our favorite FPS shooters? That and more on today's episode of Bumba Bitching and Complaining. For the longest time, competitive multiplayer shooters have been one of the top genres in the entire gaming industry. These games like Halo, Call of Duty, Fortnite, Valorant, Counter-Strike, Apex Legends, Rainbow Six Siege have consistently pulled in some of the largest player bases in the last 20 years or so. Although for the longest time, particularly in the Halo Call of Duty days, the primary source of revenue for the companies making these games was always limited by the yearly release cycle. Back then, consistent long-term updates and support was not the norm in the gaming industry. It wasn't really feasible pre the 2000s era. And so all of the big selling franchises in the gaming industry back then relied on sequels to increase their overall company's revenue. And then around 10 years ago, the industry shifted and started looking for other ways to squeeze out more dollars from their player base. Now all of a sudden, skins and cosmetic features often were locked behind paywalls instead of being given a natural path of progression towards unlocking them. And sometimes, in the most egregious cases, there's been instances where actual game-breaking advantages could be gained by simply just paying for them, otherwise known as a pay-to-win model. And in general, companies were beginning to learn that it's much more profitable to sort of offer like almost this theme park type environment within their games. And just like a theme park, it's not the price of admission where they make all of their margins, it's the concessions. Once you enter a theme park, it's the turkey legs, it's the ice cream, it's all the food that they sell, the beer. All of that extra shit gets jacked up in price because they know people are already there for the fun that the park provides. This is how it feels to play your average modern multiplayer shooter. Players log on to these games to have fun, and then along the way are enticed by the more superficial luxuries. In fact, the biggest games these days don't even rely on the price of admission at all. Games like Fortnite, Valorant, Counter-Strike, Apex Legends, and even to a lesser degree Warzone are all free to play because once they get the player in the door, they're able to sell them all this extra stuff on top of it. All of these games make so much more money than they would have 10 years ago just by selling basic like cosmetics and various quality of life features. So that layer of monetization has already been fully expanded on within the gaming industry. And at this point, if a company wants to further optimize their profits year to year, they need to get a little more creative. And this is where they start bringing in other people into the fold to analyze their statistics and help figure out how they can get more money out of what they're already providing for the player base. And that entire timeline that I just laid out to you is exactly how we got skill-based matchmaking as it is today. Despite the fact that it is ruining the player experience and people universally across all of these games and their player bases absolutely despise skill-based matchmaking. You see, there's one key statistic that all of these companies are looking at within their player bases that guarantees the most possible revenue over time. And that statistic is player retention. Player retention is the holy grail of the gaming industry. It is the golden goose from which the golden eggs, the profit, is farmed from. These game developer companies have determined that players are more likely to spend more money over time if they are consistently engaging with the product more often. In other words, if a player logs on to play Fortnite every single day for longer hours at a time, they're significantly more likely to spend money on the game, buying skins or battle passes or whatever else the game has to offer in the store. So now if these companies wanted to optimize their profits, the only thing they had left to do was design these games around player retention. The competition is no longer who can make a better game that sells more copies than this other game that they're competing with. The goal is now who can get the most people with the deepest pockets to spend the most time on our game. And the answer is gambling psychology. Now, at first, when I say gambling psychology, you're probably thinking about loot boxes. It's been a common practice in these free-to-play games to offer up sort of like slot machine pulls, which have a chance of intermittently rewarding you with different cosmetics or features that you probably desire. It could be a legendary skin, it could be a special weapon, weapon. Everyone's familiar with loot boxes, but that's not exactly what I'm getting at here. There's two things that you need to know about gambling, particularly at a casino, and that's that the house always wins, and you're not being robbed or scammed, you're being manipulated. Casinos make their profits because every single one of the games that they offer is perfectly designed so that the house has the greatest advantage over time, meaning the more people who play their games over time, the more profit the casino is going to rake in. The point is, it's a losing battle. No matter how much you play at the casino for however long, over time, you are inevitably going to lose money. So how the hell do casinos get people in the doors if there's literally no way for them to win over time? The answer is intermittent reward. There's been studies done on rats where they would press a button and the rat would be rewarded with some sort of treat. But what they found in these studies was simply giving the rats a positive reward was not enough to make the rat dependent or addicted or obsessed. In order to induce the feeling of addiction, the reward needed to be intermittent. They placed the rats in with a different treat dispenser, and this time when they press the button, maybe they'll get a treat for it. Maybe they'll go days without treats. Maybe they'll win the treats right away. Eventually, they discovered that there were optimal times to be doling out the treats to the rats. Like there's kind of this sweet spot where the rat is not getting rewarded enough, then it's going to get bored and let go of it, move on. But if the rat gets rewarded too much, it's not going to develop any sort of addiction or dependence or obsession. But if here or there, ever so slightly and precisely, 1 minute the rat clicks it, it gets a treat. The next minute, it doesn't. Maybe an hour later, it doesn't get a treat again when it clicks it, but maybe 6 hours later, it does get a treat that time. Maybe it goes a whole day without a treat, but then it gets a treat tomorrow, or it goes 2 days, 3 days, and so on. Maybe it gets 2 treats in a row, just minutes between each other. That captivates the rat's attention significantly more. And so eventually their cortisol levels start going up, the rats start losing hair, they start exhibiting signs of depression and other side effects of addiction. And meanwhile, the rat doesn't want to play, it doesn't want to be social with other rats, it is solely fixated on this intermittent reward. All it's thinking about is, if I press a button this time, am I going to get a treat? Am I going to get it this time? Am I going to get it this time? How much time am I going to waste pressing this button until it finally fucking rewards me? And that right there is what captures the attention of people who are addicted to casinos and people who are addicted to modern live service games. Despite knowing that the odds are completely stacked against them, people will still keep playing games at the casino because they may not be getting rewarded enough to totally walk away from it, but they may get rewarded just enough to keep around and hope that maybe this is their lucky shot. After all, did you know that 99% of gamblers quit before their biggest win of their life? And that's why you can't ever give up. Keep grinding, keep rolling that dice. Fucking quitters quit. But anyways, fostering these feelings or these symptoms of addiction and obsession is exactly the way to increase retention on free-to-play games. And this is why skill-based matchmaking was created, to create a system of intermittent reward. These games will track your statistics and your performance behind the scenes. They'll track how much you win, how much you lose. They'll track how many kills you get, how many times have you died. Are you dominating a lobby? Are you particularly exceeding the skill group that you were placed into? And there's varying degrees to how much a game will go out of its way to try to control the outcome of a match. In other words, some games have very aggressive skill-based matchmaking that is purely optimized for intermittent reward, whereas some other games maybe only dabble in it from time to time, or it's not as intense as compared to other games. But what the game is doing is they're giving you some sort of behind-the-scenes rating on your character or your profile for whatever game you're playing, and they're tracking things like the time of day that you regularly play the game, how many hours you tend to consecutively play the game for, how often are you coming back to the game, and what exactly is turning you off and making you rage quit the game. When are you consistently hitting a breaking point and deciding, I can't play this anymore? What are your limits? These games are tracking all of this, and then while they're matching you up with potential teammates or potential enemy teams, they're sizing up everyone in the lobby and trying to put every player in an optimal situation where they will keep playing the game. Notice how fun is unrelated to how much a person will actually play or be obsessed or engage with a game. Because players get so emotional about their performance in a match, you know, how well they're doing in the game or their win-loss rate, these games know when to praise you and to put you up on a pedestal, and they know when to rug pull you and frustrate you and rip everything that you're enjoying out from under you. Because somewhere there's this optimal ratio of win-loss, good performance, bad performance, where the person is going to be perfectly frustrated enough and perfectly rewarded enough to stay obsessed with the game, to stay addicted to playing the game. And so some games, it's not like they outright rig your matches and just make it impossible for you to win, but they'll intentionally make it more difficult for you to win at times based off the matchmake, and sometimes they'll intentionally put you in more favorable circumstances, all with the goal of rewarding you and hurting you just enough to keep you invested. And for the longest time, these companies denied ever implementing these practices, and there was sort of a debate around whether or not this even existed in the first place. However, today, this is no longer a debate. All of these companies have been caught filing patents for their own very specialized algorithms designed to increase player retention. In other words, skill-based matchmaking, or sometimes it's referred to as engagement-optimized matchmaking. And at first, like particularly in the Call of Duty community, when this first started to become more apparent, Activision would be all like, nah, skill-based matchmaking? What? Never heard of it. But, you know, if we did have skill-based matchmaking, it probably would be a good thing because new players, you know, they need time to get used to the game, to get up to speed. What? You just want matchmaking to be based off of ping or internet connection or be random and this giant pool of random public lobby players? You must be a bad person because you want to just shit on all of the newcomers to the game and ruin their fun. And believe it or not, that's kind of been the debate in these sort of gaming circles about skill-based matchmaking for the past like decade or so. People turn it into like a morality thing. They make it out like, man, if you hate skill-based matchmaking, you're just a bad person because you just want to shit on new players. Boo you. Dude, these companies don't give a fuck about player satisfaction. They care about profits. They will absolutely, unapologetically manipulate you in every which way to increase their yearly earnings. All of these companies excuse skill-based matchmaking by telling their player bases that they need to be more compassionate about the people who are just picking up the game, who haven't had time to develop their skills like you have in the game. When the reality is that new players just have the highest churn rate. Churn rate is a statistic that skill-based matchmaking tracks, which takes note of what makes players quit the game, turn the game off, or uninstall it. If the matchmaking was totally random and your average lobby had average players in those lobbies, then new players are likely going to get dicked on by even average or above average players, and they're going to be more likely to stop playing the game. Which means that Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Fortnite, they're all losing customers if they don't give them such a cushy, easygoing experience in their first few days, weeks, months, or years playing their game. That's why it's there, because the vast majority of these player bases are casual players. By definition, your average player doesn't have the skill or the capabilities that some of the more higher skilled, more dedicated players will have. So that means if you're even just slightly above average at all in any of these games, you're going to have the most miserable experience. Because if you're above average and you get matched up with average players or new players, which make up a bulk of the player base, those lower skilled players are not going to have a fun time and are going to be more likely to give up on playing the game entirely. So if you're ranking in the top 1% or even in the top 5% or top 10% of your game of choice, you're only going to be thrown in lobbies with people in the top 1%, top 5%, top 10%, effectively turning what was once a pub lobby into a pseudo-ranked lobby where you don't even get any competitive rewards for it. So these games punish you for getting good at playing them. Maybe you're never going to be as good as some of the top players. You're going to have to go against them in your lobbies, and they're probably going to bend you over and dominate you. But the minute it starts giving you easier, more average skilled lobbies, you're going to start winning again, which will get you excited to keep playing the game, but then it's going to throw you back in the high skill lobbies and fucking rug pill your enthusiasm. And the cycle goes on and on and on. And people spend more and more time on these games and spend more and more money buying the latest bullshit. Now, the idea of matching players up only with people at their equal skill level makes sense when you're talking about a ranked competitive mode. But the problem with all of these big games these days is that these practices are implemented in just the normal everyday public lobbies. Like, of course, skill-based matchmaking makes sense in ranked games because the whole point is moving up in rank, moving up in skill. But 10 years ago, public lobbies used to just largely be a random pool of players. Like 10 years ago, if you were matching into a public lobby on Call of Duty, it would just match you with the players out there that you would have the smoothest connection with, and it would largely be random, which means 1% of the players you run into would be in the top 1%. You would run into like the bottom 15% of players 15% of the time, and the vast majority of your games would be full of averagely skilled players. So if you were above average at playing Call of Duty, then that means on average, you would perform above average. But just to keep using Call of Duty as an example, everybody knows that's not how Call of Duty plays these days. These days, every single lobby in between matches is completely reshuffled, and it's not as random as it used to be. It's intentionally putting people around your similar skill level. So now, if you're an above average player, and on average you are being put in above average lobbies, you're not going to perform above average very often. In fact, you might actually get shit on quite a bit. And the worst part is, even if you do perform well, it's going to take significantly more focus and more of your mental energy in general just to keep up. Every single game is going to feel like a sweat fest. Like you've got to try so hard just to even perform decently. And this is miserable to experience. And even worse, it makes it more difficult for you to improve over time and feel proud of your improvement. Because if all of the shitty players are getting matched up with other shitty players, then they're less likely to actually progress or be challenged enough to increase their skill level. If you want to go from being a beginner to an intermediate player, you need to be exposed to and playing against intermediate, more average skilled players, so that way you can pick up on what you need to be doing to improve and then adjust accordingly. It's not good practice to be practicing against the bottom 25% of the skill distribution. If it was totally random, then your average lobby would on average, mostly consist of average players. And of course, it would be difficult to pick up in the first place. And maybe you start out with a piss poor win rate, like a 30% kind of win rate. But soon, if you keep playing, you're going to get better at the game. And maybe your win rate will go up to 50%. And then if you really start progressing, your win rate will go higher. You'll maybe have a 60% win rate or 70% or more. But now there is like a hard cap placed on how much you can win. The games are often optimized to keep you around somewhat of a 50%-ish win rate, where every match is going to feel like a coin flip. It's going to feel like gambling. And there you go. Ding, ding, ding. That's the whole point. And what's even more nightmarish to think about, like I said, back in the day, the matchmaking was largely random and based off of connection. So that means on average, yes, you're going to run into average players. But if you were in the top 1, top 5, top 10% of the skill distribution, you would only run into these type of players who come into your games and dominate your lobbies maybe 1%, 5%, or 10% of the time. So now imagine the difference of playing today, where if you're ranking in the top 1%, 5%, 10%, 25%, whatever, if you're on the higher end of the skill distribution, your lobbies are only going to be filled with the sweatiest motherfuckers out there who've never even seen a vagina in person before. It's fucking hell. It is torture, and it would have never happened years ago. Even if back then you were just an average player, and even if some really high skilled player came in, dominated your lobby, drops like 50 kills, no deaths on you, drops a fucking tactical nuke on your ass, even if that would happen, it would only happen 1% of the time. But now these fucking companies use this excuse where it's like, oh, an average player should never have to go against a top player. But they don't care about what's fair or not. They just want that average player playing the game more and buying more skins. It's ridiculous. It makes these games unplayable after a certain amount of time. Because eventually you keep playing a game, you're going to get better at it. And the better you get, the more frustrated you're going to feel. So don't ever let some other cuck-ass, bitch-ass YouTuber tell you that skill-based matchmaking is some sort of necessary evil. Because if it went back to the way that things were, every match that you would get into would feel much more fair and evenly balanced. The only difference is that lower skilled players would have higher churn rates, and therefore the company, be it Activision or EA or whoever, would lose out on their potential earnings. It's not some altruistic move from the developers, it's a gaslight. And I know I've spent a lot of time talking about how this affects people on the higher end of the skill distribution. It's a common misconception that it only affects them. It may be the most frustrating for people on the higher end of the skill distribution. It is equally as detrimental to all levels of skill. If you're below average at a game, you need to be put in lobbies with people who are better at the game than you, so you could observe what they're doing and try to keep up with their speed. Failure is very much part of the process, especially as a beginner. Whenever you're trying to learn a new skill or different games that ask different challenges of their players. But bad players are going to stay bad players. Average players are going to stay average players. Above average players are going to feel stuck and like they can't just casually enjoy the game at all. And it's not just going to hinder people's development and their ability to improve at the game over time. It also guarantees that everyone at every level of skill is going to have to put up with some level of frustration and feeling stuck. Because if you're being put in below average lobbies, the reason that you're not being put in higher skill lobbies is because you haven't surpassed the skill level of the people around you yet. So that means if you're like a bottom 15% player, eventually over time, the game is going to start progressively giving you higher skilled players. So maybe you'll be top 15%, but you'll get matched up against people who are in the top 25%. Well, if you're not capable of improving beyond the top 15%, you're going to get shit on by the top 25%, just like people who are in the top 10% are getting shit on by people in the top 5%. Wherever your average skill level averages out on this distribution, you are perpetually going to be kept in this cycle where you're getting matched into favorable matchups here and there and guaranteed unfavorable matchups another percentage of the time. So really, almost at every level of skill, the casual public lobby game mode is almost never going to feel casual if you're playing at the actual skill level it determines you should be at. It's like ELO hell, but for everybody, and you didn't even sign up to be a part of the ELO system. Pub lobbies play just like competitive lobbies should be. And the catch here is that this largely unaffects the top players in any given game. Because the truth is, the skill ceiling for all of these games is somewhat infinite. Because these games are inherently competitive, that means that over time, people in general are going to keep getting better and better at playing the game. If you take someone who's like one of the top players in the world, or even top 500, top 750, they are likely infinitely better than the people even just a rank below them. There's no limit to how skilled anyone can get at the game. Like, once you're looking at the top of the skill distribution, the gap between the top 1% and the top 0.1% is absolutely massive. It's fucking absurd. And so I do think part of why skill-based matchmaking has gotten so much worse over the years is because, typically speaking, these games in general tend to cater more to the top end of the skill distribution. Professional players tend to have the most clout or the most like power when it comes to influencing the direction that a game takes in development. Pro players also inherently promote the game that they're playing, so it's in the best interest of like Activision, for example, or EA to be in good graces with the higher end of the skill distribution. And if these top 500, top 750 players in the world are just already so much better than everyone else in the first place, they're not really as incentivized to speak up about skill-based matchmaking because they're just going to shit on whoever the fuck gets thrown in front of them anyway. So pro players often don't really talk about this very much. They rather talk about like overall like balancing and nerfs and buffs that they want the developers to consider, not like the whole skill distribution. They've already conquered the skill distribution. And so I don't think skill-based matchmaking is going anywhere. In fact, I only really see it getting worse with more and more games being heavily affected by it. Fortnite is nothing like how it used to be. It'll give you free wins the first minute that you get on after a few days. But eventually you're going to be going against players who are just building like crazy. There's just no way for you to do anything about it. And you're going to get stuck somewhere along the way where you're trying your absolute hardest to keep up at whatever distribution you fall under. And whatever level you find yourself stuck at on average, be it average, above average, below average, you're going to be stuck at your absolute limit of what you can reasonably tolerate, where you're going to be winning just enough to stay invested in the game, but losing just enough to stay frustrated. And even worse, engagement optimized matchmaking is what's being pushed in the ranked systems these days. So for the longest time, pub lobbies were just going to shit with skill-based matchmaking. But ranked lobbies were largely unaffected by this because they were inherently skill-based. This is where engagement optimized matchmaking comes in, because in a ranked system, people are already divided into different skill categories, of course. You know, your different ranks like bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, master, grandmaster, top 500, top 750. Everybody is already ranked somewhere, but the players in these ranks are all trending in different directions at different given moments. Like maybe somebody climbed up really fast to diamond, but now they're struggling and they're getting like hard stuck at diamond 2. When meanwhile someone else has climbed up to diamond pretty quickly, and they keep climbing up to master or grandmaster even more quickly than the person who's hard stuck. So what the engagement optimized matchmaking is referring to is specifically the gambling psychology aspect to all of this. Yes, maybe you're at diamond rank and you're getting matched with other diamond players, but what the game will do there is every now and then it'll periodically match you up with better or worse teammates depending on if it determines a win or a loss will keep you playing the game longer. So like maybe you're in diamond and you get matched with a bunch of diamond teammates, but when the game wants you to have a greater chance of losing, it'll match you with teammates at your skill level, but who are trending downwards, who are losing more or not putting up as great stats or aren't dominating in their games enough in the solo queue. And when the game determines it needs to give you a pick-me-up, a good win to keep you motivated, it'll match you with players at the same rank as you, but who are also trending upwards. So now the catch here is technically if you play more games, then over time, if you truly deserve to climb and be at a higher skill level, you're going to. But it now requires that you play more games baked into the ranking system just to keep up and keep climbing. It slows down everybody's climb and it manipulates people into investing more time into the game, getting addicted with the gambling psychology that we broke down earlier. So games like Call of Duty, Apex Legends, and Fortnite might have a very egregious skill-based and engagement optimized matchmaking in their public lobbies, but even games that are largely competitive like Overwatch or Valorant or Marvel Rivals or Counter-Strike, these games are still using the engagement optimized matchmaking as well in their ranked modes. People have proven this, okay? I saw a guy who was top 500 in Overwatch trying to climb back to top 500 in the new season, and it just being an absolute sweatfest grind for him in solo queue. And then that guy made a brand new account that had a clean slate on the engagement-based, skill-based matchmaking algorithm, and he grinded to top 500 in an afternoon with like a 90-something% win rate in solo queue. This stuff is real, and it's driving everybody insane. I've even noticed this myself in Marvel Rivals, where sometimes it's like the game just hands you the perfect teammates for your situation, and then it's almost like the teammates you get the next game, it's like so bad, so god-awful, you can't help but notice that it's intentional. Now, I love Marvel Rivals, and I know that if I keep playing more games, I'll be able to rank up even higher. Like, I managed to solo queue to Grandmaster, although if you ask me, without engagement optimized matchmaking or whatever, I probably would have hit Celestial last season. The one big change that Marvel Rivals specifically made this season that I really appreciate is they made it so that the final rank score that you're given at the end is more determined on individual player performance. So you can be like one of the top performers on your team in a loss and lose much less rank points than you would have previously. And conversely, if you really carry your team in a win, you'll get rewarded even more for it. So despite the fact that it still noticeably has some form of engagement optimized matchmaking, and the company NetEase Games has been proven to have a patent for EOMM, the fact that it puts some more power in the player's control to like consistently perform well and climb, that feels good at least. But regardless, it's still extremely frustrating to deal with, and this practice has ruined so many other games for me. Like, Call of Duty's been a fucking lost cause for years. I mean, their games in general have gotten shittier, and that's one thing. I've made videos about that before. But the skill-based matchmaking over in Call of Duty was also a large contributor as to why I don't play it anymore. And what inspired me to make this video is my favorite game of the last 5 years, Apex Legends, is completely fucking unplayable for me at this point. I love Apex Legends. I literally have like 5,000 hours on the game. I've left it on overnight a few times here or there, you know, but like a good solid few thousand hours actually playing the game. And I sit around the skill level of a Masters ranked player, but I gave up grinding ranked on that game a long time ago because I haven't agreed with a lot of the changes they've made to it over the years. I find the pub lobbies much more enjoyable, or I used to, except as I've gotten better at the game over the years, now all of my pub lobbies are completely fucking unplayable. It feels like my account is just totally nuked. Like I'm just destined to go against the top end of the skill distribution no matter what I do and be fucking miserable the whole time. Because Apex has some of the worst skill-based engagement optimized matchmaking in the entire industry. Shocker, I know, EA is one of the greediest companies in gaming, but the pub lobbies in Apex feel exactly like ranked lobbies. And what's worse is that the game tracks your performance separate from your actual ranked competitive games. So despite the fact that I've been sitting at like bronze and silver or whatever rank for like multiple seasons at this point, years even at that, despite the fact that I haven't climbed out of silver in years, my pub lobbies are loaded with Masters players and Predators. For those that don't know, Apex Predator is the top rank and it's the top 750 players in the world. And I regularly, every single time I fucking sit down to play, multiple Predator players in my lobbies. You can see them with their sky trails. And I love everything about the place that the game is at right now. I love all the buffs and nerfs that they handed out this past update. Like, I think the game is in a really solid place, except I just can't fucking take it anymore. Like a few weeks ago, I hopped on with my friends Brian and Connor for the first time in like months that we actually sat down to play the game together. And they've played the game significantly less than me. Like, I have thousands of hours into the game. They each have like a couple hundred hours at best. They're much more casual players. Except the way that this matchmaking works, it goes off of the highest ranked player in a party. So the game determines they need to be put in my lobbies with me over in the top 1% of the skill distribution. And it's my responsibility to carry them, even though they're going to get shit on the entire way through. And I'm expected to sweat my fucking ass off if I want to keep playing the game. And we just couldn't fucking take it anymore. And check this out now. So they actually started telling you before you load into a game what end of the skill distribution they're connecting you to. So the way that these games tend to work, and in particular Apex, is they usually prefer that you win early onto getting on for the day in hopes that you'll get hooked onto the feeling of winning early and try to grind out another win for the day. And so we lost our first game on. Okay, no big deal. But now because the algorithm wants us to get that early win, in our second game, it knocks us down in the skill distribution. You can see they knocked us down the skill distribution.
That'll be a good thing.
They moved us more towards the middle of the bell curve. And so, of course, we were able to dominate and crank out a win. But, oh no, we just had a really dominant win. So you know what that means. Back to business as usual. Yeah, look at that. So now we're going up against the top, like, 0.1%. Okay, yeah, cool. That's ridiculous. At least they're transparent now, but like, that's ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right? And so what happened was we went from dropping a bunch of kills and a bunch of damage and winning the previous game to spending the whole next game barely making it into the top 10 and only dealing like 400 damage combined because we were running for our lives the entire time. And I'm expected to carry my friends who aren't at the same skill level. And I could show you more clips. This would just keep going on and on. Every game, it would go up. Honestly, at times, like that wasn't even the highest skill distribution it put us in. It put us even further up the scale, even after all these losses. And eventually we just threw in the fucking towel. We just said we had enough. Every match I would load in and we would keep getting put in the top 1%, top 0.1%. We just said fuck it and booted up Marvel Rivals. And don't get me wrong, Rivals has engagement optimized matchmaking as well, except the public lobbies in quick play on Marvel Rivals are significantly more properly balanced than most of the other games that offer public lobbies. Like playing unranked on Marvel Rivals still very much has a good balance of like mixing you up with some players around your skill distribution, but it's largely random and it's easy to pick up with friends. And even if you're not winning every single game, it's not like it counts towards anything. It's just pubs. It's for fun. Apex Legends public lobbies are fucking dead. It is insane to think right now. Me and my friends were getting ranked in the top 1%, top 0.1% skill distribution throughout all of our public matches. And yet if we had decided to boot up ranked, the actual competitive mode, we would have been put in bronze and silver lobbies. How does this even make sense? At the very least, if you're gonna put me at this higher skill distribution for public lobbies, at least give me like a fucking rank to show off or some shit like that. But no, they want you to grind that out too. You can find some form of this in pretty much any large multiplayer shooter these days, but Apex Legends has it the worst when it comes to the public lobbies. And that makes me so sad because I don't want to grind ranked. The game is played very differently in that sort of setting. And it's impossible for me to boot up with my friends who are at a lower skill rank than me and just have fun. We're all just running for our lives the entire time and it's pointless. I find this also very much to be the case with Fortnite as well. It seems to be a trend amongst battle royales in particular. And like we talked about, this totally fucking ruined Call of Duty years ago for me. And like I said, the future is looking bleak because they don't do this by accident. It's very profitable for them. When you're pulling in billions of dollars in revenue, even hundreds of millions, of course, when you're dealing with such large numbers like that, any bit of like the tiniest improvement you could use to tilt that in your favor, if you could make like 1 or 2% more money than you were making previously by implementing EOMM or skill-based matchmaking, that translates to tens of millions of dollars for these companies added on to their yearly revenue. So this doesn't seem like to be something that's going to slow down anytime soon. Although I will notice with Marvel Rivals in general, they've provided a much more user-friendly experience. Like a lot of the more predatory practices that you see across a lot of these live service games aren't really that prevalent in a game like Marvel Rivals. And so maybe competition will shift over time to whichever company is providing the more enjoyable experience because NetEase Games is killing it it right now with Marvel Rivals. But even that game, as much as I love it right now and as much as I play it these days, the EOMM is still very noticeable. And I just think all this is so scummy and really shitty that we have to deal with all this. It's a shame that the people who play these games the most and support them the most and tell all their other friends to download their games, it's a shame that these players get abused the most with this whole system. It's difficult to ignore, and I think it's killing all of the popular multiplayer shooters these days.